Good morning, everyone. I know it's been a while. It's been all week. I felt a bit ill. I got a touch of the corona, maybe, but so that's why I'm having a lot of content this week. But what a week it's been, hasn't it? From Joshua Dubois at the weekend through Eubank Junior's vociferous outburst. He's great at a conference into Eubank. He knows how to work his way around a press conference, no matter how much it's going to cost him in legal fees. But that was fantastic. We had the preview for Beterbiev Bivol and the press conference. All right, so we've had a lot of stuff this week, a lot of stuff to talk about. I want to start off with saying, certainly early in the week, my instant reaction to the fight was how bad Joshua was, how many mistakes he made. Don't really need to go through all the technical mistakes that Joshua made. You lot are all educated enough to have seen them for yourselves. I know you guys who watch this channel and many other channels are very educated, so we don't need to explain that. But Joshua was telling a couple of things to note on the night. Now, watching it live, I was doing some building work at home, so I joined it literally on the ring walks. But I went back and watched it, and it looked to me like Joshua arrived at the stadium round about the time Liam Gallagher was on stage. Now, in Joshua's last two performances, you've seen him for quite a long period in the dressing room, working drills on the pads with Ben Davison, working on the combinations, just warming up and generally getting himself sharp. Now, to me, this time, it didn't look like he gave himself enough time, and I know they blame traffic, for him to warm up and go through drills on the pads and generally just acclimatise, loosen up, get your iron, throw the combinations on the pads, work up a sweat. So it did look like he came in very cold, and that's not an excuse, it's just an observation. Whereas Daniel Dubois, I think, was there at least a couple of hours before, so there's one thing. There was also, watching the fight back, there was also a couple of technical things, or quite a few technical things that Dubois did specifically well. Knowing that, as I said beforehand in my pre-fight, that Joshua, as he's done in his last two fights, will look to slip or lean back and counter Dubois' either jab or right hand and come over the top with his own. And this is what he was looking to do. And one of the sort of the small nuance changes that Dubois made was that when Dubois was throwing his jab or his double jab, rather than stepping in a straight line, he would step in around. He would throw his jab and he would move away or move around while throwing his jab, which would take him off the centre line of which Joshua's counter was coming back. And if you go back and watch the fight, most of the counters that Joshua tried were just graze or just slip by, because Dubois, when he stepped in with his jab, was stepping around. And as he stepped around, that allowed Joshua's counter to sail past. And then, as I said again in the immediate video after, it allowed Dubois to go first and third. So Dubois would step around with his jab, and then as Joshua's counter came, he'd gone around that, and then that allowed Dubois to come over with his return after that, essentially going first and third. One of the other things that Dubois would do, and he picked up on this very early, was the fact that we all saw that Joshua's hands were very low. Sometimes he was throwing the jab from sort of chest or just below the chest height. And Joshua, when he threw the jab, every time Joshua would throw the jab, he would step in with a jab. So there was an elaborated front leg movement alongside seeing his jab hand come up. And this also meant that Joshua's jab had to travel a lot greater distance. We've often criticised Dubois for having a slightly out front guard. But if you combine all these factors together, it meant that when Joshua went for his lead jab, Dubois could see the front leg moving. He could see the hand raise up from the chest to activate Joshua's jab. And because his hands were high, he could quickly snap his jab and beat Joshua to the punch with his jab and be first with the jab. Even though Joshua had initiated the movement for his own jab first, Dubois was able to see this, and because of his body position and because his jab didn't have to travel so far and because his jab was faster, his jab would always land home first. There was also elements where Dubois would offer different looks to Joshua in terms of how he set his shots up. Sometimes he would throw the jab off the back foot rather than the front foot. And when I say that, I don't mean on the back foot going backwards. What I mean is when you step in with a jab, you can either step in with a jab from the front foot and leave the back foot placed where it is, and that will propel you forward. Or you can throw the jab by putting weight on the front foot and moving the back foot forward and moving in with the jab like that. And Dubois would mix this up constantly, and Joshua couldn't deal with it. So we can talk about how bad Joshua was, but we have to emphasize how great Dubois was in exploiting all the things he did wrong and picking up on them. And Don Charles for covering every base, essentially. There are many, go back and watch. There are many little things that Dubois did superbly well. Like on the first watch, you can't. I must admit, probably a lot of you. When I was watching it the first time around, I was a little bit kind of amazed at kind of what I was seeing and didn't fully appreciate or take in what I was seeing. It wasn't till a couple of rewatches you look at it a bit more intricately, you slow stuff down, you repeat stuff, and you see just the little nuanced differences in which Dubois brought in and Don Charles brought in to really execute an absolutely flawless game plan. And like I said, Joshua was as awful as I'd seen him. Joshua is not as bad a fighter as he displayed on that night, but that shouldn't take away the fantastic, flawless execution which Daniel Dubois portrayed, because I can't really emphasize how much of a fantastic display that was by Dubois. And we could go over these little technical differences all day, but this is not really a video about that. Secondly, there was a lot of blame thrown at Ben Davison. And famously, we got the audio from the corner from Ben Davison's instructions, and he's taken a lot of the blame for the loss on bad advice, bad corner advice. So what we're going to do, we're going to sit and listen together to a lot of corner advice, and we're going to separate a lot of the myth from fact, and we're going to look at actually, was it Ben Davison's instructions that really cost Joshua, or was it Joshua just not thinking and being just throwing punches that are essentially suicide? So I don't know what the audio is going to be like. I don't know how this is going to pass on video, but we're going to try anyway. We're going to go through this corner advice. So let's have a look. So Davison there is saying he's going off your feints. So Joshua's feints, Dubois is then going with his own jab or right hand, and then he's telling him to slip and maybe bring it up or slip or counter, whatever. So don't have much of a problem with that advice up to this point. And now he's saying in situations where you're hurt, go back to the ropes and with a high guard. Now, this was probably the best advice in terms of when Joshua was hurt, because now when we saw in the fight, when Joshua was hurt and he decided to get on his bike, Dubois' footwork was better and quicker. So Joshua would go back in straight lines, but with Dubois having a better and faster jab and moving his feet faster, going on retreat in straight lines certainly wasn't helping. And even when Joshua sort of moved back in an L, Dubois would step across, and he would either step across and throw straight, or he would step across and throw an arcing shot round that would catch Joshua moving back in the L shape. So again, in terms of when he's under pressure, probably high guard, back to the ropes, try and block as much roll is probably the best advice, because Joshua getting on his bike was not going to work. Dubois was always going to come out on top. So there he's saying when Dubois is bouncing, now when you're bouncing means you're not essentially set to throw that punch, or essentially a punch with a lot behind it. So he's saying to go when Dubois is bouncing, which is a good opportunity. When he's bouncing up on his toes, he's not specifically set to throw a really dangerous offensive shot. So again, nothing massively wrong. In this, my opinion, that's all it is. So there he's saying, when you're galloping around the ring and you're not being threatening, you're not offering nothing, you're just on the retreat with your hands down, essentially you're saying to Dubois, come and fucking take my head off. Now, first off, Ben David says we've got to be smart. There wasn't really a point in this fight, and especially in this round to come, where Joshua was being smart. Anything but. Right, now, let me just see if I can back this up. Right, so he says he's rushing with the jab every time unless you're galloping around. And he says when he rushes with the jab, slip and bring it up. Again, and you can say slip and bring your right hand on the inside, but what he's saying is when Dubois rushes with the jab, slip and bring it up. And I think what he means is he rushes with the double jab. And when you throw the double jab, you don't throw the double jab from a static stance. When you throw a double jab, you're always stepping in behind the second jab. So he's saying when Dubois is doubling up the jab and rushing it and stepping in, slip and bring it up with the uppercut, bring it up with the uppercut. So again, not the worst advice from a technical point of view, but you got to remember at this point, Joshua's still pretty scrambled. So the chances of him executing that, perfectly, who knows? But essentially, asking Joshua to, when Dubois rushes with a jab or rushes with a double jab, to slip and bring it up, again, not too bad, as not suicidal at least. Now, I believe that's Lee Wiley, isn't it? Now, Lee Wiley, to me, now, from what I can hear of this, and maybe I'll be corrected, but it seems to be like Lee Wiley is the one that is saying to Joshua, come in behind your own double jab and then bring it up. Which, now, you can look at this and say again, when you throw the double jab, so when you throw a single jab, let's say you throw a single jab as a rangefinder, or you throw the single jab with intent. Okay, you're going to have a second or two where the jab's in the face. Now, if you've ever been in the ring, when you see fighters, a lot of times they'll hold the jab hand out in front of the opponent's face, and the opponent will knock it out of the way. Because when you hold the jab in the face, when you hold your jab hand or your lead hand in the face, you can't see past that glove. Okay, so it blocks the vision. So a lot of fighters will hold it there, and then they will drop the right hand in, on the left, drop the right hand in behind it. And you're going to see it very late because the jab hand is obscured. When you throw the double, you're going to throw the first jab, you're going to step in behind the second jab, and if they both land, there's extra time there for your follow-up shot where your opponent is obscured, unless he slipped both of them jabs, unless he's dealt with them. But if they've both landed, there's a good opportunity that off that double jab, you can follow that with something that he's only got to sort of half see at the last minute. Whether I'd advise to throw an uppercut off the double jab is a different matter, because essentially, even off that double jab, your opponent's head is going to be moved back, or he's possibly going to be moved back, and then that jab, essentially, you're still throwing that jab from the outside, which is, again, very risky. See, now there at the end, you then hear Ben Davidson almost repeat what Lee Wiley has just said. And Ben Davidson says, double in his face and bring it up. Now, first off, in this situation, my advice would be, look, let's get through these rounds. This ain't time to roll the dice yet. Like, don't try and get on your bike. Get up close. Every time he throws, go low, go around the outside, cling on. And cling on to the point where you lose a point. At this point, you ain't winning the fight on points anyway. So you just hold on for dear life. Mate, you hold on so hard that referee's got to prize you apart. All this stuff buys you valuable time to try and recoup your senses. And this was Joshua's problem. He was scrambled, senses were gone. So my advice would be, every opportunity, be safe. Cover up, high guard. When Dubois goes, come underneath and grab, or come on the outside, move in and grab so hard that the referee has trouble to split you. And even to the point, if you get to the point where the referee deducts a point, get your senses back. I wouldn't be saying roll the dice in a state that you're in where you're not thinking straight and you're already vulnerable. To me, now that is bad advice. But then Ben Davison then goes back to, from the advice of go in behind a double jab and bring it up, he's now saying to slip Dubois' jab and bring it up. So we've got two different instructions being relayed to a guy that's probably going to have trouble spelling the word is at this point in his state of mind. So there's quite a few technical instructions there, and then almost counter instructions. One is to come in behind your double jab and bring it up, and the other one is to slip his jab and bring it up. Now, and as we'll see, Joshua couldn't take this and couldn't execute either. One of those bits of advice I don't mind. The other one of stepping with your double jab and then bring it up behind it, to me, really does seem the riskiest tactic you could ever do. There's a reason why the uppercut isn't thrown from distance or from the outside. Because the uppercut has to come down and up, that hand is away from you for a long time. So the uppercut generally is used on the inside. It's a short punch used on the inside. Quick dip at the knees and drive up. That's how the uppercut is used, unless you're Roy Jones, of course. And none of us are Roy Jones, are we? So, but essentially it seems like Davison goes back to saying double up your jab and then bring it up, which is like... So now he's told him to mix it up, and I'm assuming the mixing it up means slip Dubois' rushed jab and bring it up, or then throw your own jab or double jab and then bring it up after that. And the uppercut is probably the most technical shot as well to get correct because of your timing of it, where you're throwing it in terms of distance and so on. So you can understand how Joshua, in his state as well, could have been confused by these instructions. And this is not me having a dig at Ben Davison. I'm just, this is just my opinion, but and I don't think Ben Davison is any less of a trainer after this. Let me just say that. So let's just see this out.
He hasn't got his head back to that.
Now, so Joshua gets knocked out, and this is where now the blame has been put on Ben Davison for this loss, for this knockout. Now, nothing that Joshua did that led to being knocked out was the instruction from Ben Davison. What Joshua did, he'd thrown right hand after right hand. Dubois would kind of return with whatever. And then what Joshua did, he threw the uppercut with the backhand from the backhand stance, and his left hand was down here somewhere. So he stood, he's here, he's thrown an uppercut, and he's throwing the uppercut from such a distance, it's like a... you could see it's not even a technically correct uppercut. It's kind of it's a reaching uppercut, and this hand is here. You're essentially saying, here I am, put me out of the fight. I'm giving you the free opportunity, hit me on the chin, and that's what happened. So it's just that I don't... some of the advice that Ben Davison would give you a question, and you would say situationally, probably not the best. But they opted to roll the dice. They opted to go out on their shield. And who am I to question that? I'm a nobody, essentially. These are just my opinions. But when you break that down, the point at which Joshua got knocked out on was not on the specific instruction following of Ben Davison, is what I'm trying to say. So he's getting a lot of flack. Yes, you can argue, as we've just broke down, a lot of that advice is not the best, but the final uppercut that Joshua threw is a suicide shot, essentially. It's a suicide shot. You know, what they were talking about, a lot of people talking about post-fight about the uppercut being dangerous, is him being caught with the right hand from Dubois. And it was essentially because he had the other hand low. It wasn't on the uppercut side that he got caught. It was on the other side because his hand was down here, as it was through the majority of the fight. Both hands were. So yeah, you know, open to debate. That's just my view of it. Anyway, this is going to be talked about for a long time, isn't it? Moving on. Chris Eubank Jr. That was wonderfully entertaining, wasn't it? Him talking about how they're all scumbags. Frank Warren has lied and cheated his way through his sort of promotional career. Not really have much to say about that. You know, Frank Warren's been known to be more than generous with the mistruths, hasn't he? So, but Eubank's great at a press conference. He's one of the best out there, and you forget about his fighting career. When you hit Eubank at a presser, there aren't many that will outdo Eubank in the verbal area, are they? He's very eloquent in what he speaks. And I'm sure that's going to cost him legally. I don't see the likes of Hearn or anyone else doing the court thing, but Frank Warren, G-Man, made a video and he sort of emphasised that if anyone, in terms of, you know, legalities and stuff, Frank's the last person you want to take on, isn't he? Because Frank has been doing this shit for years, and he's been taking people to court for years, and he's very adept at this stuff. So very brave by Eubank, very entertaining by Eubank, but financially probably not the best move. The promo for the Bivol-Beterbiev fight, again, another wonderful piece of high production. No real narrative, but it all looks great. And in a 4.5 minute promo, give me some high budget visuals, and I'm sold. I thought it was great. You had the old, Bivol slaying the bear, and it was a very, very. If you remember the opening scene of Gladiator when it was the Romans against the Germanians, it was very much like that. There was elements of Game of Thrones, elements of the Northman, as Joe Stunner said. All really good, entertaining stuff. Can't wait for that fight, Bivol-Beterbiev. What a fantastic fight. I'm just glad we're finally getting to see it happen. But anyway, that was it. Sorry for the lack of content, like I say, been feeling like shite if I'm honest. But that's it for today, and I'll see you all soon.
Let's go tottering around the ring.